Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you're with us wherever you are. If you're joining us on television here locally in Santa Barbara, California, we welcome you at TVSB, and so grateful for you. And so many of you are joining us from around the world at goodlifetelevision.org and the podcast, which is Good Life Conversations. So any of the podcast platforms, if you want to listen on the go, you can tune into the podcast there. And we see that a lot of you are, which we're grateful for that. And all the typical social media platforms you can find us, and also the YouTube channel, which we've kind of over the last year, really, we've consolidated to try to get, I think pretty much every long form interviews there now. And then they break them up into what are called power clips. So there's just some great stuff there. There's great people, all walks of life. We've had just about everything over the last 4 years for, in business leaders, public servants, authors, actors, writers, coaches, athletes, overcomers, entrepreneurs. It's been such an amazing thing that has developed here. And so we're just grateful to have you along for the journey. I have an actress, author, speaker with me today. Alison Robertson is with me. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so pleased to be here.
Yeah, it was great this weekend, kind of being able to read about you, just your kind of how you started off in all of this stuff, and then coming to Los Angeles, and then she's done a lot of TV, and from Dawson's Creek and The Sixth Sense to The West Wing and others. There's a whole list here, and then the interesting thing to me was kind of how you transitioned into this world of coaching and speaking and really helping people in that way. Tell us what brought that, kind of how that happened.
I think I've always been drawn to helping people, and I'm an only child, and I think I'm an only child who always wanted to have a big family, right? Growing up in New Jersey, I grew up in a multi-generational household. My grandmother was with me, my mom and dad. But I think I'm going to date myself. I think I was always enthralled by the Waltons and that big family. And throughout my life, I was always a collector of people. My grandmother always said, "You don't collect things, you collect people."
Mm.
And that sort of always carried with me, and it sort of drew me into acting because I could be around so many different people. But then when I had my daughters, that's when I realized that I wanted something more out of life. And that was sort of what's the reflection that came back to me, was how could I give back more into the world? And also I wanted something more stable and something that I could show them. And that's sort of how that coaching part of me came out, right? How could I help people? I had someone reflect it back to me that, you help people all the time. So, and once that spark really turned into a blaze is about 15 years ago is when it happened. And once it started, that path just kept growing. I mean, I went and got certified as a life coach, a solution focus coach, a transformational coach, you name it. I was just hungry for information and knowledge. And then it grew into becoming an author and a speaker. So the path sort of just kept evolving for me and opening up for me. For
That's
sure.
so great. That's so
Yeah.
great. Before we get into that in the book, what was the experience like for you of when you first got to LA, and you kind of, I think you'd already landed or were doing Dawson's Creek or something maybe before that, but talk about kind of your experience kind of landing in Los Angeles amongst this, probably was somewhat of a different world.
Yeah, I mean, I came from the East Coast, so I already had quite an edge to me, and I had my training behind me. But coming to Los Angeles was a completely different animal because, first of all, I came here when I was 30. So when I showed up, I was told I was old. So that was a very rude awakening because that's not something we experience on the East Coast as much as a performer, as a creative, right? You're sort of on there on your merit, on your talent, and I wasn't aware of this thing in LA, which is, um, how you look or age, right? And so when the
Right,
age
right,
thing
right.
started for me, I was like, that was really hard for me because I came from, the New York theater scene where I was like, oh, okay, what do you mean I'm too old? I just
Right.
turned 30. So that was sort of hard for me at first, but my tenacity and my belief in myself. And I think that's what sort of sparked me wanting to show that to other people, right? But first coming to LA and pounding that pavement and realizing there's so much opportunity here. There's so much opportunity. Don't let me dissuade or dismay anybody from going after their dreams. But, I just was always course correcting and saying like, wait a minute. And the first thing I learned coming here was stop saying, but we don't do that on the East Coast, or we don't do that in New York, or it's different, right? It's like, when in Rome,
Right. Right.
So that was the first thing that I have, like, okay, so how does it work here? How does
Yeah.
it work? And also not to lose myself, to realize what was great about what I do.
Right. And so again, we just mentioned it, but Alison is a certified professional coach, creating her own firm in 2010. She's a columnist and an author. And the book is entitled Enoughness, the simple truth to embracing you. What are people going to discover when they open this book?
It's palatable. They're going to find themselves. They're going to be able to hear their own voice. In the sense that if there's something calling inside of you, that little voice that says, hey, maybe I want to be an artist, or maybe I want to start that Airbnb, or maybe I want to take that vacation, that little voice that maybe you've never paid attention to, I hope my book will allow you to take that moment to hear it and then grow and expand on it. And all of a sudden it's in front of you and you're walking into that world, that life, that journey. That's what I'm hoping.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
What is it? Talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of times people get that they feel something or they think something,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's gone, it's crushed, the dream is dashed, that was a stupid idea, that's not possible. Like, I think we can talk ourselves out of, it seems like, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I think probably really rarely do we find ourselves talking ourselves into something like, yes, I can do that. Talk about that kind of that transition, or that, how do we change that?
Yeah, it's that's the self-talk, right? And that's there's a whole section on my book about that. And we hear, affirmations and how do we get from point A to point B, and why do some coaches work, and why do some diets work, and why do some things work for some people and not for others, right? Is it a secret sauce? Are they stronger? Are they more disciplined? What is it, right? In some cases, some people say it's discipline. In some cases, some people say they're smarter. No, it's how they talk to themselves, right? It comes down to absolute self-belief. So someone out there listening or watching us might say, okay, great. How do I get that self-belief, right? It's actually, it's scientific in some ways, right? It's the reticulating activating system. There's your brain and your spinal column, and at the base and between those two things is this little thing called the reticulating activating system, right? It's the thing that filters everything that comes into us, like all the stimulus we have coming in, thousands and thousands and thousands of things. How do we know what to pay attention to? Reticulating activating system. We tell it what to look for in our world. So when we tell it what to look for, then it goes out and scans the world and brings the information to us. So if we tell it that we're bad with money, or we're not good people, or we're never going to get our dreams, well, the reticulating activating system, the RAS, does not know positive or negative. It just knows what we tell it to go get. So it'll go search out whatever you just told it. An example is, why do you hear your name in a crowd of thousands? Because the reticulating activating system knows to hear our name. Or a mom hears mom and turns around. Or that you buy a car that's red that you've been looking for and searching for and going from car dealer to car dealer. You get on the highway and you see that red car, and you see that red car, and you see that red car, and you think to yourself, did I just make the worst purchase ever? No, you've been feeding the reticulating activating system for weeks or months or days, so it's finding it. So if you can take that theories that I just gave you that are not as sensitive or or dear to you, and think, okay, if I tell myself every day, or I tell myself I'm great with money, or I tell myself I can lose whatever I want or get stronger, or I can tell myself I can go from point A to point B, and I feed that system in my own self and change my self-belief, guess what? I can tell you what's going to happen. You're absolutely going to get it, because your brain will then function and find all those things for you, right? It's scientific. And there's a beautiful doctor that I've studied, and his name's Dr. Shad Helmstetter. And he is the authority, and he's one of my favorite authors ever on self-talk. And he wrote the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And he explains it much more beautifully and much more scientifically than I did, but it's one of my favorite things. And forget coaches, forget gurus, forget everything. That's the key to everything as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the thoughts that we're having, how we're talking to ourselves, you're saying the power of that, even just like in the context of the way the brain works.
Yes, it's wired that way. There's a beautiful YouTube video uh, called The Backwards Bike. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's called Smarter Every Day. I can't think of the gentleman's name right now because I'm over 50. But it's The Backwards Bike, and he takes a bike and he takes a bunch of scientists, and they're engineers, and they take a bike and they reverse engineer it. So when they turn it left, it goes right. And when they turn it right, it goes left. And they take it all around the world and try to get people to ride it. And nobody can do it because the brain cannot get it. They cannot get it. So he takes the gentleman that does it about 9 months for his brain to rewire on how to ride a bike. It takes his son about 7 days, right? Because his brain is more malleable.
Right.
So, and he explains it so perfectly how long it takes us to break a habit and why, so if we can think of it that way, then our dreams are that much more obtainable when we see, oh, it is in my control. It isn't just you're lucky or I'm lucky or you got this because the stars shine down on you. Yes, right? Preparation, hard work,
right,
meets opportunity. That's luck. Right? That's luck.
Right.
So, and
So
I just
true.
wish everyone knew that, because it's not that it's easy. It's not that it's easy, because it's not. But is it worth it? 100%.
Well, and I think especially in a world where it seems like oftentimes the voices that are screaming at you are that you're not enough. You don't have what it takes. You're not pretty enough. You're not strong enough. You're not smart. Like, or there's, I think that it's a little bit counterculture in terms of this is a discipline. I mean, and again, you just said it, it's not easy. I mean, but like all disciplines, it's not easy, but it's worth it, right? I mean, to say it, I think that's so true.
Because it goes against what mainstream education teaches. It goes against really parenting. What's the first thing we teach a baby? No, don't touch, don't, right? It's the first thing we teach them, which is, I mean, I don't know how to not do that, right? But it's an unfortunate way we start the way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, in fear, I think is the most powerful force, for negative, for bad, for ill in the world. I mean, fear is just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and if you're, fear of taking risk, fear of stepping out, fear of not being like everybody else, fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear, whatever it might be, and you're right. I mean, the mind, is just this
powerful computer. It's the most powerful computer in the world, right?
Right.
It's the most powerful thing we have. And people really think it's just about being smart.
Right. But how to think? You're really talking about I mean, some of it's what to think, but some of it's how to think. Some of it's just to say, I'm going to retrain myself.
And it's the little things, right? And it's not easy because, I have a girlfriend that always says, just you're the cork, be the cork floating in the ocean, right? Right. Let it just be on the wave, be on the wave. And when you're under it, when you're, I got so excited, I made my camera go on. When you're under the tide, right? That feeling. You also know when that feeling, right?
Right.
How that feels. And it's crazy because it's very hard to get someone to trust and just say, just take the next 3 days and just really talk to
Yeah.
yourself, because it sounds kooky. It sounds, it sounds very California, me being from New Jersey. It's, but I always say to people, no, but my feet are really rooted, grounded in, it has to make sense to me. It has to be scientific. It has to, I can't float away. I have to be
Right.
grounded in reality. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something about fear. Fear is forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. You have the choice. The acronym is the same, right? FEAR.
Right.
Face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. You have the choice. The choice is yours.
Right. So good. So true. And I always think, sometimes I think about, in terms of my thinking, I'll think, what am I actually believing right now? Like, not what I tell people or what I, but what do I actually think? And my wife and I were sitting just out in the living room with my two teenage boys the other day, and we were talking about athletics because they're hugely into sports. They play multiple sports, and they're at the high school level where it's like, especially my sophomore son, who's now playing varsity, and he's these football players and these basketball players, now it's the best of the best. It's no more
not casual anymore. Not casual.
Now we're like, okay, these are grown men. Like, these are grown men, and I was telling him, your approach, and this is just, I don't, this is kind of a scriptural idea, but I was telling him, in terms of your approach, you need to believe that you're the head and not the tail. You have what it takes. When you get in the batter's box, you own the pitcher. You own and guess what? If you strike out, you own him when you get in the batter's box the next time, or when you line up at defensive back against this receiver who's, a D1 recruit, whatever it is, you're the head, not the tail. That's what I said. And if you don't, and our basketball, the next shot's going in. I don't care if you missed 16 in a row. Kobe Bryant didn't care if he missed 18 out of 19. The next one was going in. It was a mentality. That actually is amazing how it works itself out.
Because what makes a belief true? That you believe it, period. That's all that makes a belief true. It's not a fact. It's not a figure. It's that you believe it. The end. And
that's so good.
So whether it's negative or positive, that's what people forget. I mean, that's why we are in the world we are in today, right?
Right.
What makes a belief true? You believe it. So let's take it for good. Let's take it for positive. Let's take it for change. So, right. I mean, this is something, I have two teenage daughters. We should form a bond. I have two teenage daughters.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And this is, I mean, they aren't huge fans when I preach this to them, but this is huge. You're in control of your destiny in a way.
So your teenagers don't think that you're great?
I mean, not exactly.
I thought I was the only one. I remember I was right 4 years ago about something, but I don't think I've been right since.
No, I have the stupidest ideas. It doesn't work that way, Mom. Oh God, Mom, please. This is not how it works. I was like, I think it does. It does.
Well, we need a support group.
And God forbid I take a picture of anything that they do or post it. Oh,
right.
My youngest.
No, I take pictures and I tell them I'm allowed to take pictures and I'm going to post it on the IG.
Oh,
and it just scares them to death. Whether I'm going to or not, I just threaten them.
oh, my youngest has said, I'm going to report you on IG and have your account taken down. She said that.
They've never gone that far, but that's genius. She's actually,
Mom, she's threatened. Mom, if you
yeah.
don't take my picture down, I'm reporting you to Instagram. I'm like, I
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I feel so much better now. I'm not the only one. That's great. Yeah, I know teenagers are it's just a terrible thing. I mean, they're not terrible. I mean, they're wonderful, but it's
are
just
they? I mean, I'm on the fence
well,
right now.
I
I
think
have to
that's well,
self-talk
maybe
myself.
that's a good question. Maybe we need to talk to ourselves a different way here because
Yeah.
it just doesn't, there's nothing about it that's good. And I, a couple of years ago, I had said that to my wife at one point. I said, look, we're talking about something. I said, look, we're in hell. So I said, I wish I had a better news for you, but we're in hell and there's no way out but through. So
True.
we're just going to walk it out.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Churchill
then,
said, didn't
I
Churchill
don't
say
know.
there's only one way through hell? And don't, when you're in hell, keep going.
Right.
Churchill,
Right.
right? It was somebody very
Right.
So, okay, we're going to stick with him.
There's no way out but through. Here's another thing that I've gotten in the habit of doing is I like throwing out the lingo, and just to embarrass them. So I'll come out and I'll say, because I learned this term recently, how do you like my drip? Do you know what that means? Yeah.
Your outfit. Yeah.
Your
I
outfit.
was just going to say the other one
I'll
is,
just say, I came out one day and I said, I think there was maybe they had a friend there too, but I said something like, do you guys think I'm dripping?
did they die? Did they
Oh,
just,
it's horrifying. It's just horrifying.
or the new one, the other one is nice fit. That means I like
Yes.
outfit.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I came out in the living room yesterday morning. My boys were on the couch and they said, look at dad pulling up. I had no idea what they were talking about. I
You're like,
found
I'm
out
not in the
later,
car.
they found out, I came to found out later that it just meant that I walked into the room. So
Nice. Oh,
now
I
I
can use
have
that.
another term I'm going to be using. Do you guys like it when I pull up? Isn't this
I'm going to
great?
see what they do. I'm going
We
to see
can
what
make
today.
we should make like a YouTube skit out of this. I think
Absolutely. Where we just do all the the hip lingo.
yeah, and I pronounce the G in dripping intentionally. I'm not saying dripping because I'm not trying to be cool. I'm going to pronounce the G dripping.
Correctly.
You feel like I'm dripping,
Yes.
going all the
Yes.
way with it. Yeah.
I love it.
So anyway,
I
teenagers, if you write a book about parenting teenagers, please send it to me as ASAP. FedEx overnight delivery.
Well, my business partner got me a speaking gig last year, and she said, "So you're speaking to 200 teenage girls." I said, "That's not my that's not my that's not my brand at all." And she said, "I said, so tell them no, thank you." And she said, "Oh, I already cashed a check." And I said, "Oh, all right." And she said, "And they're uh, 8 to 18." I said, "Oh my!" I said, "That is not me. What am I?" I said, "I have two of them that hate me. What? I
What do I have to
cannot."
say?
I
Right.
said, "What am I going to say to them? That there's 200 of them." I said, "Oh." So I said to my daughters, "What would I say to these lovely youth?"
Right. Yeah.
And my one said, "Oh, Mom, please don't do the thing you do. Like, don't do that thing, that like condescending thing you do." And I said, "Oh, okay. That's a start. That's a thank you." And then the younger one, I said, "What would you want to hear me say?" And she said, "Oh, well, if you want our attention, let us know you respect us." And I go, "Oh God, please send the check back. Please send the check back." I said, I can't." It actually worked out well, but I was sweating the entire time.
Yeah. 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 No, I totally get it.
So I'm with
Uh,
you. I'm with you.
well, I think this is such a powerful book, and in this time, like I said, because of the cultural thing, and I think everybody says, we say this about every generation, but I think there's this whole thing, the social media stuff has got to be causing a difference, a change in the TikTok generation, whatever you want to call it, in terms of these messages that and so what you're saying here in terms of enoughness in this book with its such a great title, I think the timing and the message here in terms of embracing who you actually are is really powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting because when I wrote the book, I was having trouble with the title, and I had all sorts of different titles. And I self-published the book, and I worked with a book shepherd, and they were millennials, and they said, you can't use enoughness. And I said, why? And they had all sorts of reasons. And I said, yeah, no, I think it's enoughness. I think it's enoughness. And they said, no, that sounds like they had all different, I won't even put in people's head what they said. And I said, but it's enoughness, because enoughness feels like a movement to me, like it's a choice, right? And the book came out, and then it was put on the Forbes list 3 months later. And then it was put in the Forbes list in the next year. And then we went into COVID. So my whole thing about the trajectory of the book, it felt like to me that it still has a message, because I feel like coming out of our time through COVID and that whole time period is that we all now are having a sense of, are we enough? What is, like, either from micro to macro, from our individual to our family, to our towns, to our state, to our country, to us worldwide. Like, I feel like we're all having a questioning of where do we stand? And if we do stand and we do feel enough, then I think those of us that do feel enough and that feel blessed then say, okay, how do we help? How do we now bridge? How do we walk alongside of each other and make others, and take our capacity and make it more?
Yes. Oh, that's so good. And yeah, I think that's, I mean, I believe it's true for young men and women, but what I said a few minutes ago about my sons in terms of, do I have what it takes? I think that's just such an important question for people of all ages, but especially young people, that do I actually believe that I have what it takes to survive and make it, and but let alone thrive.
The imposter syndrome, I think, I'm just going to speak to our teenage generation, I think is incredibly strong right now. And I know it's a buzzword that sort of came up in the last 5 years. It's been around since the 70s, but I think it's become very popular in the past 5 years, the imposter syndrome. And I think it's something our kids really, really struggle with. And I think I think it's because of the internet. And I think it's because, I would say to my kids, I said, you get to know things in an instant. If I say something, or you want to learn how to make a recipe, I said, you would have to wait to go see your grandmother on the East Coast
Right.
to learn how to make that thing. I said, now you just have to Google it and you could make it tonight. I said, so there's like the power that you have all this knowledge, but at the same time, there's the power that you have all this knowledge.
Right.
So
That's right.
I always say it's the gift in one hand and it causes trauma in the other. So as the wiser, just because we've been on the earth longer, not because we're smart, like we're just wiser because we've lived longer. I think it's our job to bridge this, like, this is a lot. This is a lot. And I don't know how the reticulating activating system is dealing with all of this processing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right? Because it feels so,
Seriously.
I feel like the older generation has a job of maybe having a little more patience and tolerance and understanding that how the younger generation, the millennials, I know we make fun or we just have maybe a little lack of compassion, but they have a lot more than we had in terms of dealing with.
Yeah. Yep.
That we can't possibly understand.
No. I read a physical newspaper and read the sports page. I went out to the driveway, like, to find out how the Dodgers game finished up, and like looked at the statistics in my actual newspaper in my hands. So that's kind of weird now, if you think about it. Like,
yeah, they would literally not know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, the what we've seen, I think you're exactly right. What they're dealing with, forget good or evil for a moment, just the mere quantity, just the mere
of information.
The information. I mean, it's insane. And so how do you make heads or tails out of this? And the messaging that is coming at you a mile an hour, a mile a minute, a mile, right in your face. You're this, you're that. You need to be this
24/7, 24/7,
24/7, 24/7. Yeah. So I agree. I don't think it's like, it's fun. I mean, sometimes, I'll see a video about millennials and I'll laugh, I have to confess, but the truth is that, this is what they're growing up in. This is not walking out to the driveway to pick up the paper. Like, this is a different day and age. And so with compassion, to be able to help them with our wisdom, to get to actual truth. That's what I feel like I'm trying to tell my kids is, and I'll say this sometimes, I'll stop and I'll say, I'm just telling you, you can believe whatever you want. You can believe whoever you want. I'm telling you the truth. I'm your dad. I care. So I'm telling you the truth. Like, that's my attempt to try to break through. Like, I'm just telling you the truth. Like, and then you can do with it what you want. You don't, do whatever you want, but
I'm not swaying your opinion. I'm just telling you,
right.
I will tell you something, because I grew up in a multi-generational household. My children grew up in a multi-generational household. So my parents live with us. And I will say something that during COVID, I remember turning to my dad and being like, what is happening right now? And he said, I don't know. He said, this has never happened in my lifetime. Like, I can't give you an example of anything like this. And I feel like in that moment, I then believed everything he ever said to me in my life, because he said, right. I don't know. He said, I don't have any example for you of, like, I don't know. And he actually said, I'm a little frightened because I can't tell you how this is I can't tell you what's going to happen next. And I thought, wow. So I think there is something about telling them the truth. I think there is something about saying, this is my truth. Do with it what you will.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's so good. Wow. We're already over time, but the book is Enoughness. They're going to put it on the screen. The book is Enoughness, The Simple Truths Embracing You. Alison Robertson, actress, speaker, consultant, coach, has been my guest. Alison, it's fun to meet you.
It's really a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on, and we thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.